I had read some of the initial stuff that was sent to me from 99. It said like 130 or 100.
Okay. This begins an interview on April 15th, 2005 at the University of Tennessee Center for the Study of War and Society with Mark Bolton, Dave Hollingsworth, and
Ben Thompson.
And I guess I'd just like to start, Mr. Hollingsworth, by asking you something about your parents and about your life growing up. When and where were you born?
I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, July 30th, 1947. My father was in Princeton Seminary at the time, and they were students when I was born.
Do you know how they met?
Yes, they met in high school. They were both very young. I think my dad was 15, my mother was 14, and they shared a candy bar together. And that must have taken, so they've been together as a couple for a long time, and they've been married now for 61 years.
Wow, that's impressive. What kind of houses did they grow up in? Any idea of their background, their family's background when they grew up?
Yes. I'll start with my dad. My dad is the son of a United Brethren minister, and they grew up in manses that were supplied by the different churches. And so it really all depended on what church that my grandfather was at. It was basically modest homes. My mother grew up with her folks until I think it was about 13 or 14, and my grandfather was a salesman and did pretty well, and they lived in some nice homes. When my mom was about 14, her parents got a divorce, and at that point my mother and grandmother moved back with my mother's parents in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. It was a very nice home. I used to visit every summer, and it was a very comfortable place.
Do you know how or when your first generation of your family came to America?
I know that we have a veteran from the Revolution on my mother's side, and but as far as when folks started coming from on my father's side, I'm not sure. Both lines go back and are Scotch-Irish, so I'm not sure exactly some of the specifics there.
And what was your house like growing up?
Again, my dad was a Presbyterian minister, so we lived in manses until I guess it was 1963, and the church that we were at, in fact my dad stayed there for 30 years, they gave us a housing allowance so for the very first time they were able to buy their own home. Again, the homes that were supplied by the church were modest homes. The home that I grew up in was a modest home, but it was the first home that I really considered was home, because I could, if I needed to put a nail on a wall, I didn't have to worry about what we did to the church house.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you move around from church house?
No, not too badly. When my dad got out of seminary, he went to Springfield, Ohio, and he was there for, I guess, about a year and a half. Then, when I was about 2.5, we moved to a western suburb of Pittsburgh called Edgeworth, and we were there from the time I was 2.5 until the time I was 8. And then we moved to another community about 50 miles south of Pittsburgh called Waynesburg. I was there for about 4 years, and then we moved to the eastern suburbs of Pittsburgh, a little community called Edgewood, and I moved there in 59, and I never had to move again. My dad retired from there after 30 years. I was the one that moved. I left Pittsburgh in 1965 to go off to college.
And was your mom, she was a homemaker?
She was a homemaker, although as a minister's wife, particularly in those days, it was really seen as an adjunct position. She wasn't doing anything officially in the church, but she was the minister's wife, which carried some different roles and responsibilities.
And how large was your father's parish?
The last one that he had, I want to say that it was about 600 members. It was a relatively large ministry, and it was about that same amount when he retired.
Was the church a big part of your life growing up, I guess?
It was, whether I wanted it to be or not. As the preacher's kid, you were involved, but I enjoyed the activities and things for the most part. Sunday school and getting up when I was a teenager may not have been the greatest thing that I wanted to do. So yeah, I was involved, and then I was involved particularly in my school years. I was involved with the youth groups in the evenings, and in fact my senior year in high school I was moderator of our church youth group, and I was also moderator of the district Presbytery youth group. So I took on a leadership role at that point in time.
Before you went to high school, what kind of things would you do for fun growing up?
Well, it wasn't even just when I entered high school and even into college. I loved having fun, and I played in the neighborhood. I liked to play sports and stuff, ride bicycle. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
What kind of a neighborhood was it? Was it urban? I would guess.
With the two suburbs I mentioned earlier from Pittsburgh, Edgeworth and Edgewood, are both suburbs of Pittsburgh, but it was small communities. The community in Waynesburg was both. It was a rural community. We lived in the town, but it was in a place called Greene County, and actually they were known for the mining and for the sheep industry. So there was a lot of rural things that were going on, contrary to what I had grown up with. Yeah.
What kind of sports did you play?
I enjoy football. Has always been the sport that I've enjoyed the most. Played some baseball, played some basketball. Again, wasn't very good at any of these sports, but I really enjoyed them. Yeah.
What do you remember about your schools growing up?
I recall spending a fair amount of time in the corner in kindergarten. And we 2-year kindergarten at that point. I started going to school when I was 4, and so half day when you were 4, and then another half when you were 5. I enjoyed the kids. That was always my main mission in school, was to enjoy it. Academics was secondary. And that went all the way once again through high school and college. I didn't shape up until if you want to call shaping up, it changed an attitude about my academics with the service. Yeah.
And do you remember any friends specifically that stick out growing up?
Yes. Let's see. There's a young fellow by the name of Mike Witherspoon. Mike, in fact, had a heart defect. He was a year younger than I was, and he died, I think, when I was 7 and he was 6. And there's another little boy that we played with by the last name of Ross, and the 3 of us would do a lot of stuff together. Had a number of friends in Waynesburg, and then with Edgewood, I had a lot of in middle school and high school a lot of friends.
What about teachers? You remember any teachers from your school?
Yeah. Some on the good side, and some on the bad. But yeah, I had some good teachers. Yeah.
Do you remember your, I guess, hometown being liberal, or was it more Republican, I guess, conservative?
Pennsylvania, particularly when I grew up there, was pretty much Democrat in that area. I think my parents pretty much went by who the candidates were, and that's the same as I do, although a lot of my values and things are closer to the Democrats than to the Republicans.
And your parents were Democrats then?
I would say that it pretty much went that way with elections based on who the candidates were. Yeah.
Did the civil rights movement affect your area at all?
The schools that I went to, the two suburbs in Pittsburgh that I grew up in, the civil rights issue, blacks lived in other areas, so it wasn't even an issue of them coming to our school. They lived in other areas. In Waynesburg, I had black friends and black students that were part of our class. In Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh area, their civil rights was very much there. It was a concern, but we didn't have some of the same overt bigotry that had taken places in other parts of the country. And so, actually, growing up as a pretty naive kid, I wasn't as aware of some of this as I really should have been. It just didn't play as much a part in my life.
And when did you move to Tennessee?
When I graduated from high school, I graduated from public school in 1965. Went to a school in Missouri called Tarkio, Missouri, and primarily because my grades were so horrible, that particularly the Pennsylvania schools at that time, very difficult to get into. And there was, even if they hadn't been difficult, I was a marginal student. So I went to Tarkio for my first year, and I actually did pretty well because there were no outside distractions, and got my grades together and really come home with the intent of going back to Missouri that next fall. And I started thinking about it and said, I really don't want to go back. And I ended up transferring to Marable College, just about 15 miles away from here. It was a small little Presbyterian school. And I came here then in the fall of 1966, and I've had an affiliation with Tennessee ever since.
Did you notice any difference in race relations in the South compared to in Pennsylvania?
One of the things, the spring of my sophomore year, which would have been 67, there was a KKK rally in downtown Marable. And certainly was aware of some things there. Marable College was integrated, and I had a number of friends that were black that were on the campus there. Once again, coming from that small campus, we were really isolated and insulated in many ways. I mean, we were in town, but we were kind of unto ourselves.
What about culturally? How different was Tennessee from where you'd grown up?
There again, I was used to growing up having a major city fairly close by, and I went into Pittsburgh quite often. Now, we would come into Knoxville for some major entertainment events. We'd either come over here to UT, or they might have something downtown Knoxville. So again, it was more of Marable was more of a town and rural setting than what I grew up with. But I fell in love with the mountains. Western Pennsylvania is mountainous, but not the same as here with the Smokies. And our campus overlooked the foothills of the Smokies, so you could look out and get out to the mountains, and so that was great.
You ever make it down to Cades Cove?
Oh, you found my favorite place. Yes. In fact, as we speak, my wife is over in Townsend. We rented a place for the next couple of days. So, yes, Cades Cove is a favorite spot of mine. In fact, I guess it was the first weekend that I was at Marable, and some of the guys had a bright idea. Let's go study in the mountains. Well, you guys need to imagine how much studying we've really gotten done in the mountains. But we went over to Cades Cove, over to the picnic area around the creek. So I was exposed to Cades Cove within a week of my coming here, and during the time I was a student there, from 66 until 69, we weren't allowed cars. And although a lot of students had cars off campus, and I usually was able to get a hold of a car once or twice, and I'd either go up to the mountains with my girlfriend, who's my wife, or we would come over here to Knoxville. But yes, Cades Cove is a great place.
You mentioned that you often enjoyed the students or the kids more than school.
Yeah.
Did you think it was kind of easy for you to make friends?
Yes. I was just kind of a dopey kid and got along with pretty much everybody. I really saw everybody as the same. I know that in high school there were different cliques, but I got along well with all of the kids in the different cliques. Same thing with college. There were different people of different interests, and I was able to pretty much make friends with anybody that I chose to. So making friends has always been an easy thing for me.
Was there anyone in your family that came from a military background? Is there a tradition of going to the military at all?
There is. And again, it goes back all the way on my mother's side to a Revolutionary War soldier by the name of Leverton. And then I knew that I had that in the background, but it was more sort of the Civil War that I heard more about. I have a great-great-grandfather that fought for the North. And I have a grandfather that was in the Marine Corps during World War I. My father served in World War II. I have an uncle that served in World War II. In fact, my father had talked at one time, as I was a little kid. He was already out of the Navy, but at one he was thinking about maybe going back into the Navy as a chaplain. So I always knew about my military background.
Just so we get it on record, I forgot to ask, what were your parents' names?
Gerald and Francis Hollingsworth.
Okay. So your father was in the Navy
He
in
was.
World War II?
World War II. He went in under the V-12 program, which was a education deferment program, and he did his undergraduate work, and he was considered inactive, but he was signed up with the Navy. So he did that. He then went to 1 year of med school under that program, and decided at that point that he did not want to become a doctor. Well, at that point when you left school, you lost the status with the V-12. So he went in the active duty Navy toward the end of World War II. He was part of the part of the task force that was headed to Japan for the invasion, and we dropped the bomb. So he didn't make it all the way over to Japan. They held up the troops because the war was ending.
Did he have any close calls?
No. My father doesn't speak very much about the service. I think just the fact of, I know both my mother and father lost friends that they grew up with, and the reality is that regardless of what branch you were in, and even particularly Navy, because Navy was losing a lot in the Pacific of troops with kamikaze planes and bombs and that sort of thing. So I think really the close call was the fear, I'm not going to come back, or something's going to happen. So more than what actually happened, the apprehension of what could happen.
You know where he was sent?
I know that he shipped out of San Francisco. I don't know much about the training where he did. I think it was Great Lakes where he did the training, and then he made it out to the Pacific and spent, I think it was Guam where they ended up, and then he shipped back home. He was on a destroyer escort by the name of the USS Cross.
How much schooling had your parents had?
My dad did his high school. He did his bachelor's degree at Franklin and Marshall. Did the 1 year at med school at Jefferson Medical School in Philly. And then he went back after the service and did 3 years at Princeton Theological Seminary. My mother completed high school and did a year of nurses training. And at that point she left the program and became a wife and started to become a mother.
So it was, I guess they weren't married when your dad was in the service?
Actually, they got married before my dad shipped out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when was that?
October the 14th, and since it's 61, trying to go back year-wise.
1944, is that correct?
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah. My math is still not very good from the years of sitting and not taking in the academics.
And what did he do immediately after coming back from the service?
He went to school, and
on the GI Bill?
On the GI Bill, yeah, and was able to complete the 3 years of seminary at Princeton under the GI.
Did he use the GI Bill for, I guess, house and stuff like that? Or?
I'm trying to think. Again, the manses would have been supplied by the church. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if with the house that we bought initially, or he did use the GI Bill. I'm just not sure.
So he was able to go to school full time, and that was the GI Bill his only income at the time, do you remember?
It was, yes.
So it was able to support the family?
Marginally.
Yeah.
But the GI Bill was a more liberal program at that point in time than it was later on.
And you had a younger sister?
I do. She's 11 years younger. She's my kid sister, although she's not a kid anymore. And I was thrilled when I was going to get a baby sister. And I'm still thrilled I have a sister.
I have 2 sisters.
Do you?
Yeah. And with your grandfather, you said he participated in World War I?
Yes, he went over to France with the Marines. He didn't see combat as far as I know. I mean, he never talked about it. He was shipped over there, and I don't know if the war ended again at a point in time. I know he was very proud about being a Marine.
And do you know where he's from?
From the Pittsburgh area. Yeah. We just can't get out of Pittsburgh, I guess. Although, again, with my folks, both of them were born in the Lancaster County area in the eastern part of Pennsylvania, so Pennsylvania is very much part of our roots, but different parts of Pennsylvania.
Were your parents fans of President Kennedy?
I don't think so. And as I think back on it, at that point in time, there were issues with my father being a Presbyterian minister. There were some concerns, and found out to be not a concern, that possibly if we have president, that the church would play or in some way dictate some of the policies. So I think there was a concern about President Kennedy. They certainly didn't dislike him, but there was I'm going to say that for that election they voted for the other candidate.
Well, you mentioned when you moved down to Maryville that you would come into Knoxville for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things were going on in Knoxville?
Well, again, a lot of it had to do with different entertainment people that would come to the UT campus. That was really what we would find. In fact, I would subscribe to the Knoxville weekend paper so that I could find out what was going on over here. And once again, even though we were 15 miles away, unless you had access to what was going on over here in Knoxville, you had no clue. It was like two different worlds. So came to several concerts over here. As far as, again, you had the SEC with football, which I loved, but I never made it over to one of the UT games until I came to grad school. So my football and athletic watching really had to more with the campus that I went to. So overall, it was more music groups that would come here to Knoxville.
Do you remember any of the ones that you saw?
Four Tops stick out for me. Great concert. It was one of the first concerts I took my wife to. Yeah.
And where would they play? Which venue around town?
Played over at Stokely Athletic Center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever go to the Tennessee Theatre?
No, I did not. Wait, yes. I did go up. Now, are you the Tennessee Theater, or was it the Bijou?
They're kind of across the road from each other. They're both on Gay Street now.
I went to one of the theaters up there with some of the guys at times.
What about, did you watch movies, anything like that a lot when you came down, or growing up?
Growing up, I went to most of the popular movies, and there was a small movie theater in Maryville that we would go to. And again, if we were going to have a big date, we would go to the Capri Movie Theater on Kingston Pike, which was relatively new at that point in time, and go to dinner down there. So we would come here to Knoxville to go to major movies. Yeah.
Did you have a particular type of movie that you liked watching? Or
comedies, romance, war movies. I grew up on war movies, and that was part of what was going on in the 50s, romanticizing the military, romanticizing war. I played a lot of war games in the neighborhood with the kids, so this was part of our growing up.
Could you talk a little more about that? Because we've got one of our students here is doing a dissertation on growing up and playing with toy guns and that whole kind of culture. Mm-hmm. Was that just something that everyone did? I mean, did you kind of watch the movies and try and emulate what was going on?
Yeah. I mean, my father, first off, at home, we never had a weapon. I didn't touch a weapon until I actually went into the service. And but I'm trying to remember how young I was. It must have been 3, 4, started getting toy guns, little army figures, cowboy forts, and continued to play with those through my elementary school years. I remember one year at Christmas time, with my Christmas list, I wanted to get a toy pop gun, little white balls, and I also wanted a wagon. Well, I could either be infantry or I could be armor and ride, and because my folks basically told me money is short and you're going to have to pick. Well, I guess I was pretty bright and I picked to ride, so I got a wagon. I had to wait for that particular gun until later on. But yeah, even when I moved to the more rural area in Waynesburg, there were a lot more places woods and this sort of thing, and we would build forts and all kinds of things. So it was that's what all the kids did. When we really weren't playing sports, we were playing army at that point in time.
Ron Kovic, he made a point that goes along with this, that your generation was kind of bred for the military.
Yes.
Kind of, I guess, trained in that limelight. Like World War II was the big point and a real fantasize.
It was the proper war. Everybody was heroes. In fact, I saw the movie, and I actually used the very first part of the movie, Born on the 4th of July, with some of the work that I do, which shows kids growing up on lawn playing military. And one of the things I do with some of the veterans I work with is, can you relate to this? And most of them can, because once again, that's how many of us were raised during that period of time.
Any particular movie that stand out about World War II that you remember seeing that had an impact on you?
Not a particular one there. Although there's a William Holden was in called The Bridges of Toko-Ri.
Right.
And I think the thing that struck me with that one was, in the other movies, the heroes all lived.
Yeah.
And this was one of the, with the exception of the Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne, where he's killed at the very end. Usually these movies had much happier endings with the hero. He may have been wounded or something, but he comes back home. And the Bridges of Toko-Ri, I remember, where this hero, you see his family, and he doesn't make it back. So that particular movie had an impact, I remember, with me.
I remember seeing that when I was young as well. It's quite it's quite a shock.
What were your political backgrounds when you, I guess you're right out of high school? Did you take interest in politics?
No, other than when I had an opportunity to vote, I've always voted. I've never, even today, I'm not involved with politics as far as campaigns and this sort of thing. Again, being a very care kid, both growing up and then even into my college years until really about my senior year in college, I didn't pay much attention to politics. I was more into what was going on in my life, and I wouldn't watch the news. The mealtime in college was during the period of time that the news would be on, and so I didn't watch hardly any news and was very unaware about politics. I did subscribe to in college to Life magazine and Time magazine, and would read there, but it was reading about a lot of things and not just specifically looking at politics.
Did any military personnel come to your high school before you graduated and get you to join the service?
No. The high school I grew up in, was from, Edgewood High School, we were a middle to upper middle class suburb of about 5,000. And I would say probably to 85% of my classmates, to include myself, ended up going to college. So we were not really fertile ground for recruiters. I don't recall recruiters ever being on the campus. I don't recall recruiters even over at Maryville College being on campus there. I had to seek them out.
When you did graduate, did you think of joining the service, or
not at that point in time? And even again, as I said, my grades weren't that good. In fact, they were really poor. And if I had not gone to college, I think what my thought was I was going to learn a trade. I think I was going to become a plumber, and I would have been a horrible plumber because I'm not very good with my hands. And quite frankly, during that time, Vietnam was just heating up. The draft was not where it was. I was very unaware of that. But my senior in high school, I had torn up my knee playing football and had the cartilage torn. And later that summer, after I graduated, I had all the cartilage taken out of my left knee and some shaving done on my kneecap. And so, quite frankly, I really never thought that I would be going into the service because of my knee. I didn't think that I would be accepted. So at that point, I didn't. When I was a sophomore in college, and I had just transferred in over at Maryville, I remember there was a Marine that had come to visit his girlfriend, and he had been a college student there the year before. And I was down in the laundry room, and I got to talking with him, and a nice fellow. And what I also remember, this is in the fall, by the spring, he was back on a cane. He had already been to Vietnam. He had already been injured. He was rehabilitating. And I started thinking at that point about going into the Marine Corps. And in fact, I didn't say anything to my parents about it. My thought was, this is the spring of my sophomore year. I was kind of at loose ends. I think I'm going to go enlist in the Marine Corps. And I had another friend that was in the Marine Corps Reserves that was also a student. And I told him about this idea, and I thought he would be thrilled about it. And he said to me, can I see you after dinner tonight? And I went up to his room, and he said, look, if you want to go in the Marines, that's great, but why don't you wait until you graduate from college before you do that? And he showed me, I had some of the same pictures in the Time and Life, pulled out the recent Time and Life magazine. He said, is this really what you want to do, and is this really where you want to go, meaning Vietnam? Yeah. So at that point in time, I decided, okay, I'll wait on this. I also, that same summer, went home to Pittsburgh and was thinking about going into the Marine Corps officer program. They had a program where the summer between your junior and senior year, you could do an OCS program, and then later, after you graduated, be commissioned. And I had thought about doing that. I never ended up pursuing that. Other military things came into play.
This Marine that you had met, did he say anything about Vietnam?
He had not served in Vietnam. He was in the Marine Reserves. And
the one with the cane?
No, the one with the cane did, although not very much. Did not want to talk about it, and I realized that, and didn't ask a lot of questions.
I'm interested that after seeing him injured, you were still.
I was still interested. I wasn't a very bright kid.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing that struck me, and that was part of what I was thinking, why do I have the right to be on this college campus in a deferment while other guys are serving or fighting? And that was an idealism issue that I grew up with. I knew that something, even though he didn't say anything, I knew something other than his wounds had taken place. He was more reserved than he was when I saw him in the fall. But that was my first real inkling of the before and after. Because again, the bulk of the kids I grew up with ended up in college first. And now some of them ended up going in the service later on. I had a good high school friend that ended up in Korea during Vietnam, and but no friends prior to me going to Vietnam that I had grown up with that went to Vietnam before me.
Did your sociology, you were studying that your sophomore year, I guess?
I was.
Did that have any effect on your decision?
Not at all. No. Academics had nothing as far as anything thinking about things that I should do or not. This was really just on a personal level of thinking. I have the military history in my background. I grew up playing these games, and again.
So you were still kind of thinking more about the idealism than the actual concrete what was going on in Vietnam?
Yes, yeah. I had no clue. Yeah. I had no clue.
You say you didn't really talk to your parents much about it? Or
you mean about thoughts about going in? Certainly didn't mention, and if I share this transcript with them, this may be a something that they will learn that they've never known, because quite frankly, I wasn't going to tell them I was going to go in the Marine Corps. I was just going to go down and enlist and go in. With looking at going with the summer leadership programs with the Marines, I did tell them that I was going to go and look into it.
Did you ever talk to your little sister about it, maybe?
Not at all. And again, because of the 11-year difference, I didn't speak about it. No.
And what's her name?
Carol.
So how aware were you of Vietnam, and what's the timeline there in terms of you becoming more and more aware of what's going on over there?
My first real awareness, not only did I have to go to Tarkio College my freshman year, I had to go to summer school at Tarkio College to see if I could get my grades. I had to take a couple summer courses to see how my grades would be. So I was there even in the summer. I was the first kid out of my high school class to go to college then. But what happened, that was the summer of 65. And basically they were starting to look at drafting. And I remember someone putting a clipping up about that they're drafting. And that was the first real awareness there. I remember I had a speech class, and there was a fellow, he was a couple years older than me, and he had transferred in from another school. One of the questions is, why are you here at Tarkio College? And his comment in his speech was, I'm here at Tarkio College to get my college deferment so I won't go to Vietnam. And I mean, and first it kind of also struck me, well, that's not very patriotic either. But I hadn't really given any thought. Once again, I was devoid of watching the news during my college period of time. It probably wasn't until my sophomore year, really, and then into junior and senior year, that I was much more aware. And again, things in Vietnam were heating up. If you look at when I was thinking of going in, which would have been 67, in fact, ironically, a story about this, I started adding up if I had gone in the spring of 67, when I would have completed my training and where I would have gone. I would have completed my training, if everything had gone smoothly, right before early 68. My suspicion is I would have been in Vietnam for Tet of 68, and I would have been dead, because I would have been a new guy. I wouldn't have known a clue. And I remember years later, I was at a Maryville College reunion. I think it was about 89, and I saw this fellow again that had been in the Marine Reserves. And I said to him, you probably don't know this, but you may very well have saved my life. And we talked a little bit about that. 68, there were kids in classes ahead of me that were starting to go into the service. By my class of 69, there were a lot of us that ended up because again they were looking for women needed bodies and to replace troops over in Vietnam. So I was much more aware of it then.
Did you see many protesters, I guess, your later years of college after 68 when it started kind of heating up?
No. Maryville College was really devoid of protests, and even if there were, they were small little quiet clumps of students who might put up a sign or something, but I didn't pay any attention to it. And what was going on over here at UT at that time, I'm not really sure of.
Did you like LBJ?
I really had no feeling about him one way or the other, because again, at that time, because I really wasn't that politically involved. In my later years, realizing there were a lot of mistakes that got made under that administration, although again, the Republicans were, it wasn't just a Democratic decision. This is something that was going on in our whole country at that point.
A lot of people, there's a large credibility gap between what the Johnson administration would tell the public and then what was actually going on.
Yes.
Did you feel strongly about that at all?
I didn't know about the credibility gap.
Yeah, well,
okay.
no.
I wasn't bright enough to know about the credibility gap. I do remember, I had, and you may hit this later on, when I first came home, and I was really angry about what had happened, and I talked with my parents about it at that time. We can wait on that if
we'll come back, but go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
I already trying to. I remember when I came back home, I was really angry, and the first day that I was up in Pittsburgh, welcome home, Dave, and I really was welcomed home by my family, but I was so angry about the policies of what had happened, and I remember really just yelling at my folks about why didn't you say something about Vietnam, about what was going on. And my parents both said we were raised to believe what our government told us, and that's exactly, and that's how I was raised. So there wasn't as much awareness about some of the lies in the very beginning. Certainly now that as the years have gone on and more has been put out there, you're aware of a split on what was actually happening, was being told was happening.
You said that you grew up in the 50s where the Cold War started here.
Yes.
And you're very patriotic, or you grew up to be patriotic.
Yes.
Did you believe in the policy of containment with Vietnam, or with communism?
I believed in what we're being told, and that was that we needed to contain all over to keep the communists at bay. Yeah.
And that was the general feeling on campus, I guess, as well, was it? I guess there wasn't too much questioning.
Again, on campus there was very little discussion about Vietnam, and I know that sound, this is the Vietnam era,
Yeah.
but we were on this small little Presbyterian school, and there just wasn't a lot of worldly awareness. There were a few
Yeah.
that were enlightened, but most of them weren't the folks I was hanging around with. We weren't very enlightened.
That's interesting to hear, because, sorry, I was just going to say, everyone assumes that the 60s everywhere was like Berkeley, and there were
Yes.
these riots and everything, but
No.
it's good to hear that other side of the story.
No, it wasn't. And I'll go back to, and probably be something you'll get later on. I was on leave to go to Vietnam. In fact, it's ironic that we're doing these interviews when we're doing it, because a number of my dates revolve around April. I was at Fort Benning, came down and got orders for Vietnam, and ended up over here at Maryville. About the 25th of April was when my leave started, and I visited my girlfriend and went home to Pittsburgh. And the Kent State riots took place on the 3rd. I drove, and in fact, one of the girls that was killed from on Kent State, Allison Krause, is from Pittsburgh. So there was a lot of publicity about this. She grew up in the suburb of Necron. But Kent State took place on May the 3rd. I left on May the 4th from Pittsburgh to come back down to Tennessee to visit my girlfriend. And she's originally from Columbus, Ohio. And my mother loaned me her car, which was convertible. And my wife's family is about a mile from Ohio State. For whatever reason, I decided to drive over to Ohio State. This is the day after Kent State. And I had the top down. Karen.
Okay, you were just saying about going to Kent State.
Right. Actually, I was at Ohio State, and saw some kids walking across campus with these hankies over their faces, and I thought, geez, there's a flu epidemic. And all of a sudden, the tear gas started drifting over our way, and I smelled it, and it took me back to, we went through tear gas training when I was in the service, and I knew immediately what it was, and then the bells and whistles went off and said that there's got to be some sort of demonstration somewhere close by. So I turned the car around and headed back, and where I headed back to, there were reservists that were at some of the major intersections with weapons, and I remember heading back toward them because that's where, at that point, I felt safe. That was on the 4th of May. The 5th of May, I drove down to Knoxville. I got my wife and I were going to get engaged on the 6th of May, and I picked the engagement ring up at Diffler's downtown Knoxville. Drove right down Cumberland. It was a beautiful spring day. Kids just kind of hanging out, taking in the sun, throwing frisbees, and it would. Now, if there was anything else on another part of campus, I didn't know about it. But once again, it was like it was very detached from what I had just seen, and certainly Maryville. In fact, Maryville, when I was on leave during that time, several students asked me to speak at a peace rally at Maryville, and I chose not to do it at that time. I didn't want to deal even with my own feelings of the war. But there were small little rallies that were going to be held over at Maryville. which was different than the time, even a year later than when I graduated. So some things started to change a little bit.
This is in 70?
This is in 70, the spring of 70, which is exactly 1 year after I had left it.
Did you happen to see when Nixon came to the Billy Graham concert?
No, I did not.
Was that 70?
I think it was. Yeah.
That was 70.
My assumption is I would have been in the service at that point in time. Yeah.
That's certainly some fascinating stuff that we're going to definitely return to that. So the decision to enlist now, I guess we can go forward with that.
The decision to enlist was kind of by default. Knew my deferment was going to end, and nobody is going to hire me right out of college with the military hanging over my head. So my way of finding out what my draft status or what I thought my military status would be was I'll go down to Knoxville and I'll volunteer to enlist with the hope thought that they're not going to take me because of my knee, but I at least then would be able to say that I'm not going to be taken. Well, I went with a friend, and we were going to go. We went down and we went up and talked with a recruiter over in Maryville, Army recruiter, and so we both down and took the intelligence tests and that sort of thing. Well, with me, because I had the knee problem, what I was enlisting for was officer candidate school. And with the knee problem, they referred me to a specialist here in Knoxville. In fact, he was just down Cumberland. And I got over there. This is about a week later. I remember the orthopedist was working on my leg, and he said to me, "Do you want to go in?" I had a choice. And he said, "Do you want to go in the service or do you not want to go in the service?" And at that point, my patriotic zeal had started, and I said, "Yes, I want to go in." Truly, with that question, it changed the course, or my answer changed the course of my life in many respects. Some bad, but mostly good. So I ended up, they thought that my knee looked really good at that point in time. Okay? So I went in on the delayed entry program, and that meant I graduated from college in the morning. It was a June morning, and by the afternoon I was here in Knoxville with my hand up, being sworn in, and I took 119 of 120 days that I could take for the delayed entry. And so that meant that I was going to go in active duty September the 29th of 1969. And again, part of what I thought at that point was, if you're willing to take me, I'm no better than anybody else. However, you alluded to Nixon. With the Nixon election, part of what the philosophy was if he is elected, he's going to withdraw from Vietnam. This is the tail end of Vietnam. I won't be going to Vietnam. And so the thought process still wasn't that I was going to go to Vietnam. The thought process was, I'm going into service, and Vietnam will be over by the time I'm ready to go.
Did you vote in 68?
I'm sorry?
Did you vote
in
68?
Yes, I did. And I'm sure I voted for Nixon.
Right. Yeah. So what did you do that summer, from June to September?
My girlfriend and I went to work down on the New Jersey shore. I was a short order cook, and she was a waitress. We were there for a couple months, and then we were being paid horribly. And so we decided that we'd go back home to Columbus for a month or so. I would go home to Pittsburgh, and I worked for a month. And then I came back down here early September with her and just hung out with my friends and stuff. Although a real critical issue, and it's still very much part of my life today. One of the guys I was in college with, he was our college quarterback. His name is Harvey Butch Crabtree. He's from Loudon, Tennessee. Butch, right before senior year, came up to Pittsburgh to visit his girlfriend, who was another Pittsburgh girl. And I remember him telling me, I think I'm going to get drafted. He had transferred when he was a sophomore and lost 3 credits. Well, he was from a small town over East Tennessee, and he was not considered for his deferment a senior because he had lost those 3 credits. Well, they drafted him, and he went into the Army, and he left for Vietnam in January of 1969. Our class graduated in the end of May, and by the middle of June, Butch had been killed. And that truly brought the war home to me. I learned of his death. His girlfriend contacted my parents in Pittsburgh, and my parents, we didn't have a phone, and so they wrote me a letter. And I got word that he had been killed, and it was devastating. And I started to get a hold of some of the guys. He was in a fraternity that I was part of, and I got a hold of some of the guys and many of them didn't know either. And when I went home, didn't have money to go to the funeral. And I don't even think at that point I thought about going to the funeral. But when I came home in August, I visited his fiancée, or his girlfriend. And although she was his fiancée, that was horrible. That was, and I was just getting ready myself to go into the service, and to see the devastation with her. And then she asked me, she knew I was coming back to the Knoxville area in September, and she asked me when I come back, she was going back to school over at Maryville, would I take her over to Butch's folks? And I said, sure. And I did. And that was a very real burst of reality. It's not casualties anymore. It's people I know. It's families, and to look at the devastation with that family, and that made a tremendous impact on me in thinking about Vietnam from that point on. And it really has colored my life in many ways.
So that summer you began taking a lot more notice, I guess, in what was going on over there.
Yes and no. Again, we didn't have TVs.
Right.
It's never around TVs, I guess. But maybe that's good. I watch too much now. But was not as involved during that 120 days. I knew I was going to the Army, but I was kind of detached from it.
You hadn't watched Ted Unfolding or anything like that when that was going on?
It was happening. In fact, Hamburger Hill was happening the last several weeks before I graduated. Yeah. I didn't have a clue. I just was not a very worldly guy.
And your girlfriend Margie?
Margie.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you were going to propose to her after training? Or
yes. We had dated. She's 2 years behind me, and she's my wife of how many years now? 30. We're working on 34. We dated for my last 2 years of college and her first 2, and we still dated as much as you can date when you're in training, and we got engaged right before I went to Vietnam with the thought that we would get married when I returned home the next spring. So we got engaged on May the 6th of 1970. I had about 3 weeks left, I guess, of leave before I headed off to Vietnam.
She had a strong influence in the decision to go to Vietnam.
Margie is really very similar to me in that we really spent a lot of time together. In fact, I remember her father somewhere asked her how much studying or how much time she spent with her in the day. And he was appalled because it was a lot of time, and that should be time that you're spending academic in the library. I think we did go to the library a couple of times, as I recall. I looked at her more than I did my book, but she also we just neither of us were that exposed to what was going on with the war. She was always supportive of whatever I wanted to do and needed to do.
What about after you saw Butch's announcement? Did that make you think about it a little bit.
Made me think about it a lot, and her as well.
Was she with you when you went to see
No,
them?
I went by myself with his fiance. Her name is Jean King, and she and I went out there. Now, later that day, that evening, Margie and I went back over to Loudon, to Butch's gravesite, and spent some time there.
You mentioned that he played football.
He did, yeah. He was all state football, basketball, and football. Star of the town over in Loudon. He was our football quarterback, and he threw the javelin on the track team. Just a nice guy. Just a nice guy.
And he was in your fraternity, you said?
Yes. Yeah.
Out of your family.
We're not allowed. How do I put this? Yes, he was in my fraternity, and he had just come in. Yeah.
So where did you report to first for training?
I came and was in Knoxville.
Where exactly was building?
It was the induction center, which is no longer there. It was on Magnolia at that time, and several of my college friends took me over, dropped me off. We all said our goodbyes at the Army, and they went back to campus. Once again, the kids that I was with were always supportive of me and of the gang that went into service. We did not have, even if people disagreed about the politics of the war, I never had friends that shunned me in any sort of way because I went into the service. So I was inducted here during the day and flew out of the small airport here in Knoxville to Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I did my basic training at Fort Dix, New Jersey. I reported on September the 29th of 1969. And I was at Fort Dix until the day after, in fact, Thanksgiving night of 1969. That's where I did my basic.
And could you describe basic what you went?
Yeah. It was a breaking you down process to build you back up. It was the first time I had ever handled a weapon. The training during that time, there was no question really what you were being prepared for. And in the Army, even though you may have a different job, the basic training is of a infantryman. And so you learn to qualify with weapons. You had a lot of physical exercise programs, classes, that sort of thing. I think the thing that probably sticks out for me the most is the whole new concept of learning to kill. And actually, there were songs, there were chants of kill with the bayonet training. And this was really very foreign to anything that I had either grown up with. This was the start of the real thing, and the start of a new mindset.
Was basic training any different than you had imagined it would be when you were going into it?
No. I anticipated I would learn the things that I would learn. I didn't anticipate the indoctrination. I have no idea what I expected on that, but that wasn't something that I thought about.
What kind did they do to break you down and to indoctrinate you?
During that basic period of time, and I was fortunate, I really had some good drill instructors. During that period of time, breaking down could actually mean knocking you around for actually no reason at all. I didn't have that happen to me in the gang that I was around. It didn't happen with them either. But sometimes during that period of time, it could be actually physically breaking you down. It was more the breaking down, the fact that you're no longer a civilian. You are in the military, and you are ours, and we're going to have you do whatever we choose for you to do. And just forget about, you may have ties back home, But we didn't issue those. And if you get a chance to visit people, that's wonderful. And if you have a relationship at home, that's just great, but not on our time.
Did you feel a special relationship with a lot of people that you trained with?
Yeah, I was able to make friends. And once again, it was kind of an interesting blend of people. There were a lot of guys in my unit that were the same as myself, that were actually going to go the OCS route. We all went through the same basic training, but I would say 50% of the gang that I was with were college educated, and we were headed. This was for our mindset, as this was just the first step, and this ain't nothing compared to where we're going with the OCS training.
Most of them enlisted?
Yes. Yeah. And most of them, they enlisted because their deferments were up. Okay. When I finished there, I thought we were going to go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And actually, I thought that was a real good idea because it was starting to get cold up in New Jersey, and we were freezing. And Fort Polk, Louisiana, I mean, that's warm weather. I wasn't very bright. Fort Polk is home of the infantry for your advanced training. Bottom line is, they, for what reason, I guess, had sent too many people to Fort Polk, and our whole unit came down for training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and our advanced training then was as combat engineers. And if we thought we were cold in New Jersey, in Missouri, it's known, Fort Leonard Wood is known as Little Korea. It is really hot in the summer, and in the winter, it is horrendous. So we all learned to be basic combat engineers, building bridges. We spent a little bit of time on mine detonation, that sort of thing. It was more in bridges and this sort of thing. A lot of physical labor things. Pontoon bridges, regular bridges, this sort of thing. We did qualify with a few more. I remember qualifying with an M79 grenade launcher, but most of the stuff had to do with engineer-related issues. And that was from Thanksgiving night of '69 until February the 7th of 1970. And at that point, I had a Christmas leave where I went home. This would have been when I was in the training with combat engineers, and spent half my time in Pittsburgh, although Margie was with me there, and then another half down with her. I came here over to Maryville on the 7th and had a week leave before I went to infantry OCS at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I reported at Fort Benning, Georgia on Valentine's Day. And I think of it sometimes as the Valentine's Day Massacre. If you think you were run down before, it really is a very real indoctrination program with the infantry.
Do any of your drill instructors stand out?
Yes. With basic, I had a drill instructor by the name Sergeant Shaberta, and he was a Vietnam vet. He had been wounded, and they made him a DI. He was a good DI. And we had a Sergeant First Class Morales, who was a combat zone vet as well. I think, I've tried to think about this over years. I think he was World War II, Korea, and already Vietnam. They were fine. They were really good instructors. I do remember with Sergeant Shaberta, he had been downtown one night, and we had what was called fire watch. We lived in big open bays. We were in old World War II barracks that were fire traps, and part of what they were doing is teaching us to learn to be on guard duty, but the other part was to make sure that this sucker didn't burn down. And I remember I was on fire duty in the middle of the night, and Sergeant Berta had come in, and I was already starting to question stuff about Vietnam. I mean, Butch's death had already done that, some of the philosophy of the kill, and I remember asking him, "You were in Vietnam, what do you think?" And he very candidly said, "I can't talk about it." He said, we're not allowed to talk about our personal views of the war, and I respected that. And to this day, I have no idea what that may have been, although my suspicion might be that he thought that it wasn't such a good thing. In fact, I remember him hollering. I thought they had recognized my leadership skills very quickly. We had 1 week of orientation before we actually went to our unit in basic. And that night we were all huddled up, a couple hundred of us. And Sergeant Schiberta yelled out, "Hollingsworth." And I went over and he said, "You have any kinfolk in Vietnam?" And I said, "No, not that I know." And he said, "Okay, get out." He had a friend that he had served with the last name of Hollingsworth. So he was just trying to see if there was a connection. I don't know if that would have been good to have the connection or not, but those two do stand out.
What was the morale of the Army at the time? Get any sense for that?
We're still in Vietnam, and we're going to. There was nothing discussed about we're in the process of pulling out. Everything was on. We're shipping troops over, and this is still the right thing to do.
Throughout training, was that? I know you said that you weren't really involved with the racial makeup or cultural makeup before, but in the military, did you find it different?
Oh yes, yeah, and that was great. Once again, there in the basic and AIT, and even the OCS was with, it still was predominantly white. But we did have a number of black troops there. They were great troops, and made some friends. I don't remember at that point too many Hispanics in my group, and there may have been 1 or 2 Native Americans, but we did have black troops that were part of our group, and that we were all friends. We were all in this together.
You didn't ever see any controversy between blacks and whites?
I did not. No. And a lot of the folks that trained us were black, and I didn't see any discrimination, either if it was a white instructor or a black instructor. Either way, I never saw that.
Here's something I wanted to ask. Had you seen the Green Berets, the John Wayne movie at all before going?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
And what did you think of it?
Well, ironically, I saw it with Butch and Gene in Pittsburgh, and I thought again it was the right thing. It followed the pattern. Ironically, also the first night I was at my first unit in Vietnam, the guys said, "Come on over here, we're going to watch a movie." It was an outdoor. It was a small little area, a few folding chairs and a screen, and I'm thinking, first off, this isn't good to be lit up at night, and why are you all sitting together? I mean, it just was something that didn't make sense. But they seemed comfortable with it, and I was the new kid, so who am I asked? The movie, this is the first movie. It was Green Beret. Okay, so I'm watching it the first night. Then I get to my unit. But yeah, what I thought of it was this. It's the John Wayne, and here we go.
How did it play in Vietnam?
It was a whole different script.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't under the same script that a lot of folks were, because I was in a base camp in a very secure place. It wasn't too bad for me, other than being there. The OCS, I went there on February the 14th, and I had a Lieutenant Grabinski for my tactical officer. Very fair guy, hard. We were yelled at constantly. You ran every place you went. You had no freedoms. You were nothing. But I really, again, when I enlisted, you could enlist, you could indicate, you had 3 choices of what you wanted your officer MOS to be, your job. And combat arms had to be one of them. I think I picked armor as my combat arms. And I was either thinking personnel or military intelligence. Once again, I want to write about military intelligence, that maybe they do other things than just gather stuff. Bottom line is, I was sent to infantry OCS, which was very, very intense infantry-wise. Once again, we were moving forward. We were to become infantry officers, leaders of men, and the more I stayed there for 2 months out of the 6 months. The more the indoctrination took place, the more I realized I did not believe in what was going on in Vietnam. And I couldn't lead people into something that I didn't believe in myself. I just could not do it. And I remember going to talk to the base chaplain, and that was a logical choice for me. You know, my dad was a minister, and I can go talk with him. I talked with him about some scenarios that were being discussed in the training. This whole kill issue. These people are not my enemy. I don't understand. And I remember I hadn't even made it back to my unit, and the chaplain called my unit commander and said, "You need to keep this guy quiet." What was happening at Fort Benning at that time? On one part of the base, Lieutenant Calley was being tried for My Lai. On another side of the base, we're being trained to be infantry officers to go to Vietnam. My plan wasn't to talk to anybody other than the chaplain and really try to sort some things through. So I made a decision that I was going to leave the program. Well, when you leave the program, there was no question where you were going. You were going to Vietnam. That was the penalty for leaving the program. So I knew that, and I shared that with both my parents. I shared it with Margie. Nobody was thrilled about it, but they understood why I had to do this. And so I left a lot of the guys that I had been with, and some of them, there's an ironic twist to this. And again, it was the way that it was supposed to be. I came back over here probably about the 25th of April, 1970, for a 30-day leave. One of my really good friends, and in fact I didn't find out until years later that he had been killed in Vietnam, was terrified that I was going to be killed in Vietnam. And we were from basic all the way in. And I was terrified I was going to be killed in Vietnam. The ironic part is he's the one that died in Vietnam. And as I said, I found out about his death until years later.
What's his name?
Phil Gallagher. The third, from Lexington, Massachusetts, one of the volunteers. Yeah. But I remember my tactical officer, when I shared with him I'm leaving, they had to have a talk with you. I went before the commander, and the real thought was, do you know how much money you're going to lose? It wasn't too much discussed about my philosophical ideas, and I wasn't trying to share in my philosophical ideas with anybody else. This was a personal choice that I had to make, and I made it. And when we left our advanced training, none of us were promoted because we were going to go to OCS, and they were leaving the promotions thing that was staying in. So when I went to Fort Benning, I was promoted as a trainee to a sergeant E5. But when I left, I was my rank was reduced back to a private E2. So I had these two little here, and it was about as low as you can get besides being a brand new person coming in. So again, the punishment was you're going to Vietnam. The punishment is rank wise you're a private. So I had 30 days, and I spent a lot of it in this neck of the woods. And it was between here and Pittsburgh. And I tried the best I could not to think about Vietnam and what was going to happen. I had no clue what was going to happen. And
what were your options? What was going through your mind at that time?
I thought that the policy of the war was wrong, in that if we're over there, why are we not fighting to win? And why are we over there? I didn't know anything at that point about the history of Vietnam. And so that really was not playing a factor, other than the fact I didn't see this other group as my enemy. They hadn't done anything directly to me, other than kill several of my. By the way, too, that same summer I was on the delayed entry program. We had our first casualty from our small little community. His name was Scott Verner, and Scott was 4 years ahead of me. And I knew who he was. His sister in my class, and he played football, so that made him a hero to me. He was a college graduate and was killed that summer. So once again, it came home, so the opposition had really to do with I didn't believe in how we were fighting the war, and I didn't see these people as my enemy. And once again, I just couldn't see leading people into something I didn't believe in. I just couldn't do it. So that's when I made the option of saying I'm leaving the OCS program.
Did you feel like you were alone in those views at the time? Or was it just an unmentioned
thing? I think other people probably had those same views, but it played itself out differently. And ironically, between this, it couldn't have been too long after I left the OCS program, because Stars and Stripes is the military newspaper, and I was on a guard tower my first night on guard in Quinyon. And there was an old Stars and Stripes from that week that had been up there. And what they had just been announced, they had too many officer candidates. And what they were then doing is they were going to, if you enlisted, you did it for 3 years. It could be 4, but 3 usually. What they were to do is, if you were in officer candidate school and you chose to leave the program, your commitment would be dropped to 2 years. You would leave as a Sergeant E5, and you could go any place you chose to go, because they had too many people. The ironic part is I'm reading about this on a guard tower the first night that we're in Vietnam, or that I'm on guard, and we're waiting to be hit, and thought, look at the irony of this. Although, again, it's played itself out the way that it's needed to play itself out.
Going back to training, did you see a big difference between your training at the OCS and basic?
Oh yes. Well, more intense, very infantry, and Fort Benning was home of the infantry. If Fort Polk was an infantry base, Fort Benning was the place. They had the jump schools, they had the OCS, they had the NCO Academy there. And another part of what I realized I really had bought this. If you're an infantry officer, that's good. If you're Ranger qualified, that's even better. And if you are jump qualified, that's big. And I remember thinking, this was earlier on, maybe I'll go to Ranger school, and maybe I'll go airborne. Well, two things about the airborne. I have a bad knee, and I'm terrified of heights. Okay, and that's, I think, part of when it really kind of dawned on me, you really have been into this, okay? And you saw these officers, there were a lot of light colonels down there. They were a dime a dozen. I mean, it just like a infantry lieutenant. But again, if they were Ranger qualified or Special Forces, or that was the thing. So part of the mindset was, again, not just the physical. Although physical was in discipline, mental discipline, very, very little time to yourself. And that was a lot of the training. And again, learning to be an infantry leader.
Jerry Morton has a book, Reluctant Lieutenant.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever read that?
No, I haven't. I'd be interested to read it.
Well, he talks about his training experience throughout the 60s, and he mentions eating on the square, hiking out, with the compass, going on high stuff. Yeah. Do you have any experiences about this?
Oh yeah, I was not in the Boy Scouts, so I didn't have compass training. Mm-hmm. And I remember several of us getting lost in the woods and making the rest of the group wait to go to chow because we were still out in the woods. I paid dearly for that, I can assure you. Yes, that's all part of what we did. Yeah.
Did you have any really bad experiences in the training?
No, not in any of the training portion. I was treated well. Other than, I was treated like everybody else. Yeah.
You mentioned that Cali was on your base when you were training.
Mm-hmm.
What was the kind of opinion about what had done with My Lai, and how aware were you, or what were the kind of rumors about things like that were going on in
Well,
Vietnam?
they were rumors. Because again, these things had not come out at that point in time. There's an awareness that some civilians will be killed. The other, the Vietnamese are your enemy. They're in a village. If there's one person in there that's the bad guy, they're all the bad guy. So there were things that were both. There was just the thought that there's a lot of bad guys there, and you've got to take care of them. And children can be bad guys too. But there was no discussion on our side of the base about what was happening on the other side of the base, other than we were aware it was taking place.
A lot of people said that he might have been just a scapegoat for the Army.
I sincerely believe that. Yeah, stuff doesn't just happen alone, particularly to that magnitude. And there were little My Lais. Each day there were things in war, and not just about Vietnam, in any war that happened. If you think about it, in our value system that we were brought up with, you don't do that. But that is war, and that's the reality of war.
Yeah, we talked before the interview about the Centre and what it does in its interviews, and as we mentioned, we've got over 100 interviews with veterans, mostly World War II, and it's astonishing how frequent those kinds of incidents even were in World War II, but no one concentrates on it. It was a good war, and it just doesn't fit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, yeah. If you remember in the recent film, Saving Private Ryan, if you remember when the Germans were coming out of the pillboxes after the American troops had reached the top, and they were clearly surrendering.
Right.
They were mowed down.
Right.
Now, if you think about it, the way that you treat prisoners, you don't mow them down if they're surrendering. But the reality is, it happens.
Right.
Yeah.